Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Chronic Fatigue and Burnout Recovery podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about nervous system sensitivity and particularly why some people's nervous systems feel everything so much more intensely than others. Some people notice that they seem to experience stress, stimulation, and emotional intensity so much more strongly than what they think other people are experiencing. That might include feeling very overwhelmed in busy environments. It might feel like you have terrible caffeine tolerance. You just cannot tolerate a cup of coffee. You feel very mentally overstimulated under pressure, and that can cause difficulty thinking straight. Or perhaps you can be quite emotionally reactive to stress. And although there can be many reasons for someone to feel this way, one of those reasons might be something called a genetic SNP, which is basically a genetic variation of a particular gene known as COMT or COMT, or also the longer name is catechol O-methyltransferase. And basically, the COMT or COMT is an enzyme that breaks down certain neurotransmitters in the body, including dopamine, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. And these chemicals are particularly important because they are part of the body's activation and alertness system. And so many of you listening to this podcast may be familiar with the nervous system by now. And we know we have a sympathetic nervous system, which increases activation in the system and mobilizes energy. And one of the ways the sympathetic nervous system works is by increasing dopamine, increasing adrenaline, increasing noradrenaline, and then we experience the physiological consequences of that. So these particular neurotransmitters are not all bad. We often think of the sympathetic activation as being a bad thing, but we need a certain amount of sympathetic activation in our life. It plays roles in motivation. It plays roles in focus and stress responses and decision-making and emotional processing. And it is the COMT enzyme that helps regulate how long these signals might stay active for in the body. And I guess herein lies this connection with chronic illness. If COMT is influencing how long these signals stay active for, if we have a variation of COMT that perhaps makes it work a little bit slower, that can make us more prone to stuck on physiology compared to some of our other counterparts. So dopamine, adrenaline, and noradrenaline belong to this group of neurotransmitters known as catecholamines. And these chemicals help the nervous system to respond in times of challenge. We need that. They increase alertness, they increase mental focus, and they increase our readiness for action. And therefore, this is really, really useful, or these neurotransmitters are really, really useful when the system is balanced and regulated. Different COMT patterns influence how quickly catecholamines are broken down. So some people will break down these chemicals much more slowly, and sometimes people can break down these chemicals very, very quickly. And so, as I've said already, is if you've got a variation of this enzyme that is breaking down these signals more slowly, these signals stay active in your system for longer. And this can mean that you experience stronger stress signals, heightened sensitivity to stimulation, greater emotional intensity, and difficulty switching off mentally. I'm pretty sure most people with chronic illness experience all of that. I know I certainly do. But this doesn't mean something is wrong with your system. It's simply reflecting the regulatory pattern of your system. So many people with slower COMT or COMT describe themselves as highly sensitive, perceptive, and deeply affected by environments. And, I'm holding my hand up here to all three. Their nervous system often processes more sensory and emotional information. So in any given environment, you're just processing more. And this makes busy environments, intense workloads, chronic stress feel much more overwhelming than it maybe would do to somebody who can break down these signals faster. So one of the things we really want to acknowledge is that the sensitivity, although it doesn't sound great to, have these signals in your system and to be having all the sensitivity, there are a lot of strengths. And maybe here it's important that I could share with you that years ago now, I think it was long before I even became ill. It was probably like around about 2015 or so. So over 10 years ago, I did some genetic testing and I found out I had this COMT SNP or polymorphism, and I'm a slow metabolizer. I slowly metabolize these signals, dopamine, adrenaline, noradrenaline. I break them down a lot more slowly. Even though that might sound like a bad thing, potentially, people with sensitive nervous systems often also have, or people who are maybe slowly metabolizing these neurotransmitters also have strong intuition. They have high empathy. They have high creativity. They have deep focus in the right conditions, and they have very, very strong pattern recognition. And this is actually what makes me very good at my job, because when I'm working with a client, it's about recognizing patterns that are then indicating which mechanisms need supporting in their body. I can really focus for long periods of time on the work that I do. I can go, it's almost, in a way, it's almost a bad thing, because I can get so focused when I'm in some sort of work that sometimes it's hard to pull away. And it's hard to create rest because my body just wants to keep on going. And being able to have that intuition and empathy to sense into people and what they're experiencing means that you're reading so much more of the case than just the information on your screen or what's being said. And therefore, it's a beautiful, beautiful gift to have some of these skills when the system is regulated. Because when the system is regulated, this can be very adaptive, this can be very insightful. As I said, it's a huge strength. So the issue is not the sensitivity. The issue is a system which is overloaded. Because remember, in any environment, you are processing more information than somebody who is maybe metabolizing these signals a lot faster. So chronic stress can amplify sensitivity. When someone has a sensitive catecholamine system, they experience prolonged stress. And when they experience prolonged stress, that's when the nervous system can become overactive. This can contribute to anxiety, it can contribute to disruption, difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, fatigue due to the heightened sympathetic response and the ongoing energy required to sustain it. And it can also mean that the nervous system becomes even more sensitive as it becomes overstimulated. It's really important to understand here that this is just a regulatory issue. If we're able to bring more regulation into the nervous system by supporting it with the right environment, then this heightened sensitivity actually becomes an asset, and it actually becomes a place where we can thrive and experience a very rich and meaningful life. Regulation changes the picture. When the nervous system becomes more regulated, what people notice is that their sensitivity becomes much more manageable and in some cases, a beautiful asset. They may start to perceive things more deeply. They may be able to engage much more in deep focused work, and they may be able to access creativity and not be pulled down by overwhelm in the same way. So what we really want to do is appreciate that if the system is feeling overwhelmed, that's just a sign that the load is too much. And healing is all about giving the body what it really needs. And when we notice the signs of overwhelm, although it can be frustrating to experience, it can actually also be a wonderful feedback clue, just saying, this is too much. And then it's our job to take responsibility to work out how we can reduce the load so that we feel the most in flow and in tune with the natural rhythms of our physiology. And this might include, supporting the nervous system with specific tools, maybe looking at stress reduction, just generally taking some of the life loads away, supporting resilience of the body as a whole, like blood sugar, making sure we're getting enough sleep, making sure we're managing inflammation, all of those things that I've spoken about previously. It's really important to acknowledge that the genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. And our genes interact with our environment, they're interacting with our nervous system state, they're interacting with nutrition, they're interacting with sleep, and they're interacting with our life experiences. Therefore, although genetics provide context, they don't necessarily determine the outcomes on their own. So instead of thinking of the COMT as a defect, it might be much more helpful to think of it as a sensitivity pattern in the nervous system. And therefore, because you have this sensitivity pattern, you might need more regulation work. You might need more recovery time. You might need to be more intentional with your pacing. You might need to be better with boundaries, what you say yes to, what you say no to, and overall how you care and protect this beautiful, sensitive nervous system that you have. When well supported, this part of you can be a beautiful and wonderful strength. And as I said already, I think this is, for me, I see it as a complete gift that allows me to be very good at the work that I do in the world. And that gives me a huge sense of meaning and purpose. So final sort of closing message here is, if you've ever felt like your nervous system experiences the world more intensely than others, there can actually be some real biology behind that. You're not broken and you're not flawed. But this is not something that needs to be fixed. I think sometimes we can have a lot of shame around our sensitivity. I know that I still do fall into these shame patterns where I think I should be able to do this like that, or I should be able to do that like this, or whatever it might be. I should be able to do more. This shouldn't feel so mentally exhausting. This shouldn't feel so overstimulating, blah, 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 all the stories in my head. And again and again and again, I have to keep on reminding myself that it's okay for you to need what you need. And if you do have a sensitive nervous system, just to remind you that it's okay to need what you need. Because the goal is really simply to support the regulation in the system so that you can function best. And healing is about attunement. It's about meeting yourself where you are and giving yourself what you need. And when we do that, beautiful things happen. So some nervous systems feel the world much more deeply. And I'm sure if you're one of those people, you probably wouldn't want to give your sensitivity away. And so therefore, with the right support, you can really allow that sensitivity to become a strength rather than a burden.